Okay, this is Screencast 20 of the RCS PTM 1 Term 3 Screencast. So we're going to look at the 3D now. Like I said, right at the very beginning of this series, I would far rather have a good quality 2D drawing on a plan. We've looked at the plan view of the chandler. I'd like to have a decent line drawing of the outside of where a staging area might be, or a floor cloth, or some rostra, or some steel deck or something, rather than spending ages doing a 3D, which, although looks pretty, is inaccurate. So accuracy is more important. So all 3D objects start from 2D objects. So we'll just do a couple of 2D objects, the ones we're familiar with. And the idea is that when you select the object, looking at the radius of it just now and the diameter, it's about 1.5 meters wide, what we're going to do is extrude it. And extrude it means pull it towards us as a viewer. So I'm looking down on these objects at the moment. So with the circle there, and I extrude it, I will turn it into a cylinder. So the command is model extrude, or command E. I tend to just use the shortcut. So extrude there, and it will ask us how much. So if I do, say, 750, which is about half, and do OK, and you can see that two things have happened. One, the fill seems to have vanished. So this one here is a 2D object, it's a rectangle, and it's got a fill. And this one now says it's an extrude, and it has extrude here. So like everything else, I can edit this extrude here to make it different if I want. Nothing's changed. It also has a bot Z, which is the level that this is sitting on. That'll become obvious at the moment. Anyway, just grabbing this for a second, if I choose the Flyover tool and click and drag the mouse, you can see that my circle has become a cylinder, and it was 800 thick. 800 high. Extrusion is 800. Likewise, if I do this square here, is it square? Rectangle, and I extrude it just using the shortcut command E and return, just to let you see what the bot 0 is. So if I change that bot 0 to 800, that means that it's an extrusion of 750, and it starts 800 above the ground. If I then grab that and put it on top of this, if I spin it around, you should see that the rectangle is sitting on top of the cylinder, because it starts at 800 and then is extruded a further 750. Hopefully that makes sense. If you're wondering where the colours go, so this, I'll just move this over here. So this triangle here, if I made this a colour, made it a red, when I extrude this, let's make this 300, the colour appears to go, even though it's still reading. So if I click on these, they're still saying white, and this one is still saying red, but we're not seeing any colour, because we are in the kind of 2D world. We're in the top plan 2D world. If we look at the top, we're still in the 2D world. We're in the 3D world, but we're only looking at this through a wireframe lens, if you like. So in order to see any colour, if you want to see the colours, we need to do something called a render. And if I look along the right of the top ribbon along here, I'll try and zoom in on this. Current render mode says wireframe. So as you might expect with a wireframe, we're not looking at any fill at all. We can see what would be a hidden line in there. We can see what would be a hidden line in there. We're looking at the object with no fill, if you like. In order to see colours, we need to choose one of these render modes. You can play with these yourself. OpenGL is a nice, quick, easy render. It doesn't take too long, and it gives you an idea of colours and a little bit of shading. So you can see there, we can now see the colour of it, so that's where the colour's gone. It hasn't gone, so to say, it's just that we were seeing things in wireframe. If I leave that on OpenGL and I go back to top plan again, the top plan is a 2D plan, you can see the top, sorry, I'm just gibbering a little bit here at the top. I can have a colour in the top because the top is looking down on a 3D object, so we can have colour in here, but no matter what I do, I can't have an OpenGL fill in top plan. It will pop me back into top again. As soon as I try to render it, I have to move out of the 2D world. So just be aware that the top plan is 2D and then everything else in that drop down here is 3D. So likewise, if I wanted to put that triangle on top of those, I could change the dot 0 to it. If I wanted to, I would stack it up. I can't remember what it was. Was it 800 plus, again, we can do math straight in here, 800 plus 750 I think it was. Move it over and we should see a stack if I've got that right. Yeah, pretty good. And OpenGL, there we go. So you can try that. One last thing I want to do before I leave you to play with 3D is, remember we can do 2D add, subtract. Where's my regular polygon gone? We can do add and subtract. So like I could add these two things together using my modify add surface, and I could modify clip surface, get rid of that, and then extrude that by 500. Probably an easier way of working for most people is to do your 2D work first and then extrude. We can always round off edges and chop things and fillet and chamfer and all the rest of that on this object here. But just if you're making objects, try and do the 2D work first. It's easier. The last thing I wanted to show you was, remember this triangle here? I'll just pop it back down on the ground again, so it's going to be obvious. The extrusion always happens towards you as a viewer, so if I change my plan to front and I draw the triangle, determined to call it a rectangle, draw the triangle again, just do a little there and extrude it. So I did exactly the same command as I did last time. So all I've done in both of these examples is I've drawn the triangle and extruded it. The difference is that one was extruded looking down on the plan view, and the other one was extruded using the front view. So these ended up as very different objects, as you can see. So you need to think carefully. Again, it's not impossible to stand that rectangle, triangle. I'm not going to re-edit this just because I keep saying rectangle. It's not difficult to either stand that triangle up or lay that triangle down or rotate it. Of course it's not difficult. We can use the modify rotate 3D. There's lots of options in there. We can rotate it round, stand it up and do all sorts of things. But again, it's better and more useful if you get the object drawn efficiently the first time rather than in a one-step operation rather than a two-step drawing it and then rotating it. You're just adding in steps, and if you can imagine on a bigger project, every time you add in a step, it's making things more difficult. These objects that I placed at a Z height will remain at those Z heights until you change them, so it's not like it's part of this other object at all. They are still separate objects, and that one just happens to be floating around above it. So yeah, there you go. Got some weird world, wacky kind of stuff going on there. Okay, have a little play with 3D extrudes, any two-dimensional polygon as long as it's closed, and I'll show you what happens if it's not closed in the next tutorial.